What do John Wick, a spelling bee, and a talking sausage have in common? I'm not really sure, but all of these people are in a movie together. Hey, welcome to Stupid Movie Takes, where I go to the movies so you don't have to. Recently, I was lucky enough to see an advanced showing of Good Fortune in what was a really unique experience for me. Not only was this my first time watching a movie before its official release date, but it was also the first time I've seen Seth Rogen in a movie and found myself still thinking about that movie by the time I made it to the parking lot. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't some super heady, psychological, stimulating piece of cinema. It's very much a comedy written by Aziz Ansari, directed by Aziz Ansari, produced by Aziz Ansari, starring Aziz Ansari. And as debuts go, I think that this is very much a success. The movie is funny, the plot has generally good pacing, and the storylines for the characters feel real. Even the angel Gabriel, Keanu Reeves' character. Although this version of the angel Gabriel doesn't herald the birth of Jesus Christ, he stops people from texting and driving. Which brings me to the first thing that I should probably talk about: the plot. This is your official spoiler warning. I want to talk about all the ways that this movie made me think and feel, but without knowing the nature of its moving parts, it's hard to give it an honest review. If I can figure out timestamps, I'll put them down below so you can skip ahead and just get my thoughts on the movie, although some things might only make sense if you have some idea of the plot. Again, the idea behind this channel, or at the very least this video specifically, is to talk about a movie so that you can decide for yourself if it's worth 30 bucks for a ticket, popcorn, and drink. Kind of wild that movies are so expensive now, but funnily enough, how expensive everything is comes up a lot in this movie. Aziz Ansari plays Arj, an aspiring editor and documentarian. That's a real word, right? Aziz Ansari plays Arj, an aspiring editor and documentarian that is struggling to get by. He's shown sleeping in his car, showering at a local gym, and lying to friends and family alike for the sake of appearances. He works part-time at a hardware store and fills in the gaps made by inconsistent employment and income by working various gig economy type jobs. I didn't actually write down the name of the apps, but they essentially parallel DoorDash or Uber Eats and TaskRabbit. On one such job, he meets Jeff, played by Seth Rogen, a venture capitalist who lives at the top of the Hollywood Hills, alternates between cold plunge and private sauna, and purchases watches worth $250,000. With hard work and charisma, Arj secures a job with Jeff as a personal assistant. Things start to look good, and he's able to ask his former coworker, Elena, played by Keke Palmer, out on a date at a restaurant that Jeff suggests. Of course, because money isn't real to Jeff, he makes an incredibly expensive suggestion that Arj doesn't realize he can't afford. So he puts it on a company card. Jeff finds out and fires Arj. Within a few days, he's back to the gig economy grind where bad tips and bad reviews put him on the brink of losing everything. When he falls asleep in a diner and his car is towed, he's left not only without shelter, but without a way to earn what little money he's been making. This is when he meets Keanu Reeves' character, Gabriel, an angel who's been frustrated with his own lot in life. Or afterlife? Existence? I don't know what you'd call it. Wanting to graduate from keeping people off of their phones while driving and having heard how rewarding it is for an angel to save a so-called lost soul, Gabriel eschews his other divine responsibilities for the sake of trying to prove to Arj that money won't solve all of his problems. He supernaturally has Arj and Jeff switch lives in an effort to show Arj that being as rich as Jeff
is not all it's cracked up to be.
However,
it seems to have solved most of his problems.
And Arj, enjoying all that his wealth is able to give him, resists Gabriel's attempts to convince him to switch back. In some sense, this movie is really similar to Freaky Friday meets The Prince and the Pauper, if you're familiar with those. The story has a lot of parallels in that sense. While Arj remembers life before the switch, Jeff and everyone else have no idea. Arj has the same power and connections that Jeff had, while Jeff has to live out of Arj's same crappy car.
What, I just go back to living in my car?
You live in your car?
In a last-ditch effort to end the experiment, Gabriel gives Jeff back his memories, and the two have a reckoning. It's revealed that only Arj can undo what Gabriel did, and he insists that he get more time living the rich man's lifestyle. An agreement to switch back in a couple of days is eventually made, and while Arj uses Jeff's immense wealth to wine and dine Elena, Jeff takes on Arj's brutal everyday struggles. While Arj throws parties and plans trips to Paris with Elena, Jeff gets 1-star reviews on Foodzer. I think that's the name of the DoorDash equivalent in this movie, and has his account deactivated. Arj's biggest struggle is trying to woo Elena with flashy things while she wrestles with unionizing the hardware store, causing a rift between them. Remember that in this universe, Arj never actually worked at the hardware store. Jeff's biggest struggle is the fact that after the cost of putting gas in his car, he barely has the money to scrape together to pay for a cheap motel and meal. Meanwhile, Gabriel, having ignored his duties as the texting and driving guardian angel, is stripped of his powers and is suddenly human. The only way to switch back is if Arj truly, in his heart of hearts, wants to return to his life of just barely skating by. In an incident caused by texting and driving, Arj winds up in the hospital and pretends to have lost his memory of Jeff and Gabriel both, leaving them seemingly without any recourse. This ruse is meant to buy him even more time living the good life, and with Jeff having been removed from Foodzer due to bad reviews, turns to stealing back his own watches from Arj's safe, having retained his memories for everything about the house back when it was his. After an incident with a very cleverly placed Chekhov's gun and a slip-up where Arj reveals that he does in fact remember Jeff and the now human Gabriel, the group go for tacos. A heart-to-heart between Gabriel and Arj finally convinces him that the admittedly miserable life that he has been living is the one that he wants, and everything turns back to normal. The movie ends with Arj starting the process of producing his own documentary about the gig economy, and Jeff demanding Foodzer workers be paid more and receive better treatment in a company board meeting. Before I get into what I was thinking about on the walk to the car, shout out to David, by the way, for seeing this movie with me and helping me process some of my thoughts. I want to talk about more general things. The movie is funny. I don't regularly laugh out loud at jokes from film and TV, and I genuinely had 3 or 4 moments where I was cracking up with the people around me. If you don't care about a movie's message and just want to laugh for an hour and a half, this movie is probably worth your time. Ansari is a funny writer and comedian, and despite how desolate things are for the characters, he finds ways to make the audience really enjoy themselves. There's 3 or 4 bit parts in the movie from smaller characters who absolutely deserve their screen time and help distract from the harsher plot elements with some really, really funny moments. I appreciate the fact that the love story between Arj and Elena isn't storybook, and that her values are something she stands by even when offered a luxurious lifestyle by the version of Arj that she dates that has money. While this isn't going up for any Best Actress nominations, I really do love Keke Palmer's performance. She brings a lot of honesty and authenticity to the role that makes her feel like a real woman who really wants to change not only her life, but the life of those around her. In the way of flaws, I think that as good as the writing is, Ansari's directorial debut falls a little flat for me. I was regularly distracted by how inhuman and emotionally barren Gabriel felt, even after he was no longer an angel and became human. It's worth noting that Sandra Oh plays another angel who does clearly show emotions. So Gabriel never even making facial expressions and talking like every sentence is the first time he's ever said anything just feels awkward. Despite being a smaller character that I still really enjoyed, I felt like Felipe, an immigrant who mentors Gabriel when he loses his wings and starts washing dishes to get by, was just saying his lines. I personally also worked in a restaurant in LA with an immigrant man named Felipe. He had a similar accent and didn't speak the best English, but clearly spoke with emotion and purpose when he was speaking English. The fact that this Felipe just said his lines without any cadence or rhythm felt like there was no real attempt to get a human performance out of the actor. Even smaller actors who won't have their faces on billboards still deserve directorial attention. And while I liked the story of Felipe and what he represented as a character, the lack of attention to his performance was honestly pretty distracting. I don't blame that on the actor, I blame that on the direction from Ansari, or lack thereof. And bear in mind that I would say I'm pretty nitpicky when it comes to these sorts of things, so the fact that this was his first time directing a movie makes this complaint pretty small in the grand scheme of things. As commentary on the gig economy, I think that this movie does a great job of showing just how brutal life can be. Set and filmed in LA, a lot of the shots have rows of tents in the background. For those of you who don't know, tent cities are common in Los Angeles where the unhoused population is so high. Over the course of their stories, both Arj and Jeff go from living in their vehicles to having their cars towed in the middle of the night with literally nowhere else to go. The stresses of hunger and being broke in a exploitative the stresses of hunger and being broke in a gig economy that continues to exploit workers and threaten them with being removed from poor performance or just replaced by robots feels real. The fact that all of this happens with tent cities in the background shows just how close some gig workers are in America to having nowhere to live at all. It's ever present. Gabriel, a literal angel who has never had to eat or worry about having a roof over his head or even experience emotion before, is suddenly drinking and smoking his life away, dealing with the reality that his job isn't sustainable.
I like it. It's all I have.
It sucks to just scrape by. And I think that Ansari paints that picture in a way that is true to life, even if some of the humor could be seen as being at the expense of those who do have to live like this. Where this movie irks me, and what really sits with me, is the ending. I don't believe the resolution, and as such, I take so much issue with what the obvious intent is. The answer to the question of who has it harder between suddenly and magically rich Arj and barely getting by Jeff is simple.
It's Jeff!
There's never a moment that makes it seem like Arj actually wants to go back to peeing in a bottle to get through an Amazon shift or sleeping in his car.
Don't forget your pee bottle, bro.
So why does he take that crummy lot in life? Some sense of the struggle being beautiful and somehow worth it, even with being at the absolute bottom of the barrel being a constant threat? I personally don't buy it. And I think a lot of that has to do with who is making the movie and how they chose to make it. Before I get much deeper, the next part of this becomes less about the movie and more about the messaging and conversations around the movie. It's long and analytical and probably not something I'll do every time I post a movie review. So if you just want my closing thoughts, skip to the conclusion and I won't be offended. I did a little bit of research for this part of my notes. Lionsgate, the studio that financed and developed Good Fortune, is relatively small when it comes to Hollywood studios, but is still worth well over $1 billion. The four main speaking parts in this movie are all actors who have secured incredible wealth and could probably live the rest of their lives without working again. They're also all very well established in an industry filled with people who are trying to make it. And a lot of these people are wildly talented, but still end up driving Ubers, delivering on DoorDash, or otherwise side hustling their dreams away. I think that Ansari and producers could have easily cast lesser-known actors in these parts. When making such bold statements about how hard it is for the little guy to get by, especially in the entertainment industry, why not use this film to do just that? Maybe they won't be exactly what the director has in mind, but that's ultimately the job of the director, to guide and shape the performance of the cast to make their vision clear. And this film doesn't pull any punches in that regard. We see Jeff, who is literally a person who needs to get paid to stay alive, receive lesser treatment than a food delivery bot. There's a moment when he receives a 1-star review for only having one side of ranch. That order's been taped up and sealed. He points that out, the fact that he could not have possibly checked, but the customer doubles down. Because of that review, Jeff is eventually kicked off of the app, and it's his sole source of income. That delivery bot would have absolutely had the same issue with the order, but probably wouldn't have been fired. Between self-driving taxi services like Waymo and food delivery bots being used more and more, especially in urban environments, this replacement of gig workers is already happening. And pointing that out when there's an opportunity to create at least 4, maybe more, acting jobs for people who might be staring down the barrel of that gun is, in my opinion, ironic. Speaking of irony, I want to talk a little bit more about the union that Elena is pushing to establish at her job. Anti-union sentiment and talking points abound in the rank and file at this hardware store. She does her best to highlight how good a union would be for the sake of bargaining for more than just a 5-cent raise, but unfortunately, Elena is massively outvoted. Her coworkers side with their employer and kill the union vote even though it's not in their best interest. It's pretty clear to me that the stance that Ansari is trying to make is pro-union, and Elena delivers a really, really poignant line when sitting out by the terrace overlooking LA with Ansari's character. How can I fight a giant corporation when I'm fighting just to get by? Part of her delivery of that line is why I love Palmer's portrayal of Elena so much. But I also think this really does showcase how much this movie is meant to be a piece that details how hard life can be under capitalism, and how hard companies will work to prevent unions in their stores. I don't want to get into an economic tirade, but I will point out that this movie was delayed by the writer's strike in 2023. While the vision may have been Ansari's to write, I do find it ironic that the Writers Guild of America, a guild for writers in Hollywood, had an effect on the production timeline of this movie when he's the only writer listed. That's not to say that Ansari is anti-union, but there may have been opportunities to uplift and employ those who took part in the strike, probably to their own financial detriment, that were ultimately not explored when it came to who received credit for the film. There are a lot of brave and bold statements made both implicitly and explicitly by this movie. Quotes from the film that seem intended to show solidarity with those who are struggling to get by. Themes that highlight just how unfair the wage disparity is in America and how truly brutal life can be for those living and working in the gig economy. That's what I was thinking about on my way to the car. But I was also thinking about who it was that said those things, both behind the camera, but also in front of it. Seth Rogen, as a professional actor, clearly memorized the lines he said, and at one point, when Jeff's at the same rock bottom place that Arj had experienced, asks, "How do people do this?" And I think that's a question that goes unanswered. There's no resolution in this movie. Not really. Arj's documentary starts with a Craigslist ad. Jeff's pro-worker rant is given to a room full of people who likely disagree with his statement. Even if he's a chief shareholder, what's to stop Foodzer's competition from continuing to automate people out? I had a lot of questions for what might happen to these characters next if the movie was 20 minutes longer, but because it wasn't, I'm sort of left to speculate, and they all start to dwindle down to just one that hopefully those who made the film can answer. What are you going to do? Life is so incredibly hard for a lot of Americans. Gig workers are constantly at risk of losing their livelihoods to everything from bad reviews to fender benders. Massive corporations are funding anti-union policies and continuing to convince people that these unions are nothing but trouble. Even movie studios that could have hired unknown talents and created new careers are continuing to cast and recast Hollywood mainstays. I'm not going to ask a handful of wealthy comedians to try and take on companies worth tens of billions of dollars, but when the messaging of good fortune is so clearly in solidarity with people who will never know what it's like to live at the top of the Hollywood hills, I have to ask why the movie should be taken in good faith, given who made the movie and how. If Aziz Ansari somehow ever ends up watching this, I guess this is for you, Aziz. Arj might not ever make that documentary about the gig economy. Good Fortune made me smile, made me laugh, and made me think more than anything else that Seth Rogen has ever been in. But without some sort of follow-up, it feels hollow. I don't know if I want to see Good Fortune 2, but if you ever make it, I'd be first in line to see Arj's documentary. To be clear, it's a good movie, and if you're on the fence about seeing it, get off the fence and start looking at showtimes. You'll laugh and have a good time, and maybe even still be thinking about it by the time you get to the car. But maybe that's just a stupid take. I've never done this before, and I don't know how often, if ever, I'll get advance tickets to see movies and post reviews before the general public gets a chance to see them. If you somehow manage to slog through this in its entirety, because I know it's going to be long even before I edit it, Thank you so much. Because this is the first time I've ever posted something to YouTube, I have no idea what to expect. I'm going to try to read and reply to as many comments as I can and would really, really appreciate a like or even a subscription. I love film, and I promise not every movie review on this channel is going to be this long and this unhinged. I would love to talk way, way more about acting and character development and cinematography. I have so many thoughts about so many movies, and knowing what you are excited about that's upcoming or what you've seen recently and really, really loved would be awesome for the sake of my next video. If enough people like this, I'll absolutely do it again for another movie. I nearly made a video about weapons, so it might be that. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the cinema.